The project that we're looking at here today involves the control of weeds with a natural product, and that's kind of a new idea. People have talked about it for a while, but there's nothing out there on the market right now. This dates back into the early 1980s when we were working on a completely different project that involved diseases. What we were trying to do at that time was to establish a disease organism on cornmeal, standard edible cornmeal, in the soil by growing the disease organism on it and then tilling it into the soil. That particular project was a failure. We weren't able to establish the disease, but we did notice something very interesting as we were doing that project, and that was that the grasses that we were trying to establish on the area were severely inhibited where we had the cornmeal tilled into the soil. We couldn't think of any reason for that, and we followed up on it, did a series of other projects, and to make a long story short, found that there was an inhibitory compound of some type in the protein fraction of the corn gluten meal, that has a growth regulating effect on the root system of germinating plants. It'll stop the root growth. Normally we get shoot growth as we would normally from any type of germination, but the root doesn't form. Now, the corn gluten meal is an interesting product. It's fed to every type of animal you can think of, from fish to cattle to dogs. You'll find it in dog feed and so on. It's also 10% nitrogen by weight, and it makes a very good natural fertilizer. We've done a series of trials out here at the research station where we've used it just as a fertilizer material and compared it to a variety of other types of natural fertilizers, and have found that it's very competitive with those. Now, you combine the two together, the fact that you have a good natural herbicide or a good natural fertilizer and a material that has a growth regulating compound that can inhibit the root formation of germinating plants, and the potential is there for a natural weed and feed material, just like a standard fertilizer pre-emergence herbicide that you'd buy at the store. Only this one again is natural, and it can be fed to animals and all the other advantages. We have done a series of projects on that and found that it is possible to use the material as a fertilizer, a natural fertilizer material, and to inhibit the formation of certain weeds, like crabgrass particularly, into the area, and that it is effective as a weed and feed material. There were some surprises there because we couldn't find anything in the literature about it. We submitted the idea to the patenting office. They, of course, do a very thorough search there to see if there's anything on it, and nothing had occurred in the literature before. The patent on the idea was granted in 1991, so it is patented. This is a byproduct of a process called wet milling, which is the process of taking the starch from the corn. It's also involved in ethanol production and some of the other processing steps that take place with corn. And yes, the gluten meal is a byproduct that comes when the other more expensive, more valuable materials are extracted from the corn. Yes, it has to be used pre-emergently. We have to put it on before the weeds germinate, and that's kind of the secrets to its use. If the plant has matured and developed a good root system, it acts as a fertilizer on it. It doesn't do anything that's harmful to the plant, but if the plant is germinating into the site, it will inhibit, it will stop the germination, or at least stop the root formation. The crabgrass is the most important one economically, and we have shown that it is effective on crabgrass. Just about any of the grasses and broadleaves are inhibited by it. It's going to be the annuals, though, that are going to be our primary targets. There's no post-emergence effect whatsoever. If you have dandelions in a lawn, this is not going to do it. In fact, just like any weed and feed, it would act as a fertilizer to the dandelion, any pre-emergence weed and feed. This one has to go on before the weed germinates from seed. We have two trials going on behind me. The one directly behind me now is a little bit different concept. We know that we have to put a lot of the corn gluten meal on to get the herbicidal effect, 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet or more, which is quite a bit of material. It's not as effective pound per pound as is a standard herbicide. People who want to use a synthetic pesticide are going to be able to do so cheaper and more effective than they would with the corn gluten meal. We're going to be aiming the product primarily at people who don't want to use synthetic herbicides in their lawns, and that seems to be a growing market. There are a lot of people who are interested in natural alternatives to the synthetic pesticides. Now, in addition to that, behind me we have a trial where we're looking at the possibility of reducing the amount of synthetic pesticide that would be used by using it with the corn gluten meal. We've had a number of questions on that issue. You know, maybe I don't want to completely get away from synthetic pesticides, but can I cut it in half or a quarter or something like this by using it with the corn gluten meal? And we're testing at this site corn gluten meal alone at several rates, and then we have it with a pesticide called pendimethalin, which is a standard pre-emergence herbicide widely used by lawn care companies. And we're looking at it at a quarter and a half and 3/4 and then a full rate, comparing it to the corn gluten meal alone. This product is very safe. As I mentioned before, it's been fed to all sorts of animals. We've been to the EPA to talk to them about getting the material on the market, and we were able to bring data to them that shows that the product had been used as a fish food. That's always one of their concerns, is that if it gets in the water, it's going to damage fish. It's widely fed to poultry, and that's another concern. If it's used on a lawn, are birds going to eat it and be damaged by it? It's an important component of dog food, which lawn care customers are often worried about. Is it going to hurt the dog? It's been fed to just about every animal you can think of. Likely the price would go up if we move a lot of it for this purpose. Now, the price is not that high at this point that it's prohibitive. It is going to be more expensive than a synthetic herbicide, but not prohibitively so. But it will be for those who want to use an alternative to standard pesticides. It will be enough more expensive that they will want to use it for that reason only. We, after the patenting, we began to look for marketers. We have signed an agreement, the university has signed an agreement with Gardens Alive Corporation from Indiana. They're a mail order house who handle natural products, and they are working with the EPA now to get the material registered and hope to have it on sale by the spring of 1994. We're doing a number of other projects. One of the major projects we've been working on the last 3 years is to extract the chemical from the corn gluten meal that's responsible for the root inhibition. I had a PhD student who just finished her work, named Diana Liu, that worked on that project. She was successful in extracting 5 separate chemical components from the corn gluten meal that we could show were the inhibitory materials. So we have applied for a patent on that now and are planning to follow up on more research. One of our primary areas of interest in the future will be, can we fortify the corn gluten meal the way it is with the more concentrated material? In other words, if we could reduce the rate of material and add the concentrate to it, could we get closer to what a synthetic pesticide would do? Hopefully we can.